Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor. And today we're going to have a UK election aftermath special discussion with AI Shire Tory. Welcome back to the show, AI. How you doing?
I am great, Connor. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be on here again. I believe I've been on here before on your channel.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, I must have.
Yeah, we've
Yeah,
done we did Star Wars stuff previously.
yes. No, Napoleon and Star Wars, I
Oh, that
believe.
too. Yeah,
I think
see?
I was with Rupert August. Yeah. There we go. Yes. So this is my third or fourth or some appearance. But yes, no. It's great to be back, and um, we're talking about. I mean, bearing in mind all the excitement and all the juicy stuff is happening in your country at the moment. um we're um we're sort of talking about the boring manager state of mind. So if you're in for a snooze fest, no, I'm joking. This is going to be exciting. This will be exciting.
Yeah, AI is trying to get people to leave my channel. Is that what's happening
it,
here?
it, no, I'm not no, don't worry, I'm not sabotaging. Sabotaging. No, no, to be absolutely honest, there has been some heavy clownish moments, and in the UK election, in the round and post it, and um, I think I think we'll have a lot to discuss on this topic. Yes.
Well, before we do get to the UK, do you want to give us just sort of the British like I guess response, or how it was seen from Britain, with the assassination attempt? Like, how'd that come across? I mean, your BBC reporters had a big impact on the original reporting.
Yeah, the blind BBC American correspondent. Well, he was outside the. 'Cause this is the thing. I was on a stream at the time with Iron Duke. We were about to wrap up, and somebody in chat informed us that Trump had been shot, and we continued for another hour and a half. It was, and we were just doing updates through Twitter and talking about the implication if he was killed or something. Because at this point we found out quickly that he walked off the stage. It looked like it hit his ear or the side of his head or something, the bullet that is, and it was you know in we were going along the assumption that he was okay at that moment in time. My parents at the time, they were watching watching it downstairs on the BBC News channel, and so the blind reporter, it cut back to him sort of like lying prone on the ground, and then he was outside the rally, and so he saw it from a completely different perspective than probably the other American media outlets did, and he was the one that sort of propelled the actual that there was a guy who climbed onto this roof of this agricultural center opposite. There were people who were shouting to the police and Secret Service agents, "Hey, there's a guy with a rifle on the roof," for about several minutes. I think it's now been
Mhm. Yeah.
suggested several minutes, and nothing happened. And that's sort of what's propelled the story of is there suspicious, or is this a competency crisis thing? I mean, personally, I'll just give my take. I don't think this was a Manchurian candidate, CIA sort of brainwashed, Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, the character's been called, the guy in this has been given another name similar to Lee Harvey Oswald. I won't say it on this channel because it's an offensive term used with it, but he I, I don't think this is. I think this was what was not an establishment hit. I think this was just like a lone wolf. I think what happens is you've got, as you mentioned before we came live, this DEI is this diversity, inclusion, and equity and
Equity.
inclusion, or whatever the heck. Yeah. Um, thing, and what has happened is it's lowered standards to absolutely the rock bottom. So you've got people in positions who should never ever be near those positions of um
The Secret
power
Service.
or authority, and in the Secret Service in particular. And I go along with the narrative that what happened was they saw the man on the roof, but because the Secret Service, you had US, you had marshals there, you had the state police, you had like the local sheriff's department, secret service, and I think the county police. So you had various different forces. They weren't connected to each other in radio, and they probably saw this guy who I believe was wearing some sort of beige colored somebody said he was wearing like khaki military, some sort of like military pattern trousers, or the colors that you associate with some like state troopers. It wasn't the same uniform style, but similar color. And that they saw him, but they didn't want to take a shot because they may have thought that he was a police officer or a state trooper or someone like that. And so that was one theory that's going around. Personally, I think it's just a breakdown in communication and high level of incompetency. And I just to say, you know, on a personal level, really lucky, really lucky that really lucky that Trump decided to you know, to sort of go against the prompt the prompt cue screen that he had, and sort of go freestyle and look at some graphs. And in many ways, him talking about immigration and the numbers coming in, I mean, I think his own racism saved his life. So there you go, everyone. Racism saves lives.
Are you sure it's just not the meme? I think there is a man on the roof. Let's wave to him. Did you just assume his gender? This is a Barbie meme. Barbie, are these agents qualified? They're better than qualified. They're diverse. Does that sum it up well?
I think so, and I mean, I would also go to say that because I know everyone's been ripping the the female Secret Service agent, especially struggling to put her sidearm away, and you know, she was the one that said, you know, she was caught on mic saying, "What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? What are we doing?" And I mean, that is a problem in on itself, but. I think there was also, you know, there was slow. You had the sniper team up there who had like a ridiculously slow reaction. I mean, there seems to be that. I mean, he was 150 yards, and what was it? Lee Harvey Oswald was. Well, I mean, he was supposedly. I mean, it was if you, yeah, going along with the official narrative, he was in the depository building, which. How many was like five? Was it 500 yards from the president while we took his shots? I mean, if you were arguing from the grassy knoll, you know, maybe 100 yards, but yeah,
it is crazy the failures of the whole thing, and just how much easier it would have been, like, for competent assassin, basically. But this guy, but even our assassins have become incompetent. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, he's no Lee Harvey Oswald, you know. I'll tell you that.
The competency crisis is so bad, even bad for the assassins.
Yes. To answer your original question, I mean, the larger British view here that people have asked and that talked about it, it was basically a mix of America's descending into a third world state, or this is typical, always happens in America, you know, them shooting presidents, to Trump didn't help himself by standing up and waving his fist around. That's sort of like the mix and match responses that I have. I haven't heard anyone say, "Oh, yeah, what he deserved to have is blown out" or anything like that. Nothing extreme like that. But no destiny takes or anything like that. But
that's the left wing American position. Or yeah. So okay. Well, I just think it's kind of crazy that a British blind reporter did more for the story than any other reporter.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, that is suspicious in on itself, because, you know, what's the BBC's angle here? Because they're very careful about the stories that they do, and they're pushing they're sort of pushing a conspiracy theory stuff, and bearing in mind the BBC don't like conspiracy theories because whenever there's when there's other conspiracy theories mentioned, they sort of have a spurg out moment, especially when it comes to people who are normally right wing, people like how they view Trump supporters and on the conservative side of things. So that is sort of my spidey senses there would sort of tingling at that, because that is again I I think there, and then this goes back to what I think AA and many people in our circles have observed, that there is elements within the establishment. I think majority of the establishment in America and in the West, and maybe the NATO sects, and the permanent bureaucracy, they've sort of accepted that they want Trump back in, because they want to get the country back on side. And I think the reason why they want Trump is largely because America is 50-50, well, maybe not 50-50 split, but the number of people who are Trump supporters, the number of people who are loyal to the Democrat Party is roughly the same, I would say. Maybe Trump's got a bit of an edge. I don't know the details on the independents, how they tend to go, but I feel that the Trump supporters are more devout to Trump and the MAGA movement than Democrats are to, say, Biden or any one Democrat politician.
Well, they might be. I don't think they're dedicated to Biden, but they might be dedicated to not Trump.
Mm. Yeah, and that's not, that's not strong enough when you see the energy behind. And there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about on this channel, I think, of why, and my channel, why we of Trump that we don't like, but you can't deny that the optics. I mean, he's had like one heck of an optics last few days.
Well,
I
and
mean
with the debate,
that
and
photo,
then the debate, and then with
yeah.
the photo, yeah, like those two things are massive. But there are still the like voters. Like I have some family members who even after the debate, I don't know if the assassination attempt has any changing effect on this, but they were still not sure who they were gonna vote for, more or less. At this point, I'm like, I was like, do you want mean tweets, or is it mean tweets, or a senile demented man? Like, is it really that hard? And they were like, yeah. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but well, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, one thing that we'll both talk about in this country when we get to the Britain is political tribalism is something which is the detriment to any. I mean, I will be honest, because and I know you're going to say what people will say. Well, America's not a democracy; it's a republic. But
No,
the
I
political system.
understand what you mean. Like, so continue.
Yeah. The detriment of the systems that we have is that you have the political party system, largely two-party system, though in my country it's sort of radically changed a bit since the last general election. But you had normally this two-party system, which is divided between left wing and right wing, and that's how the when you have the constant back and forth, it gives the illusion of choice, and it gives the illusion that your choices matter. And what it ends up, as we have seen, degrading society, and it degrades society, erodes social cohesion, it erodes the person, it even erodes the soul in many cases. I mean, if you look at the Democrats are, from what I see from a distance, this is outside observation, are incredibly anti-Christian. They've lost all sense of Christian values, even the ones that claim to be, Protestants or Catholics. I mean, they largely, and you look at views on abortion or what have you, but they largely go against their own teachings in many cases. And then you look at the Republican Party, and especially their recent behaviors at their own convention, where they invite and straight up worship foreign religions, and religions which are you would expect to be separate from the sort of Christian, evangelical, other Christian dominations that the Republican Party like to represent. Um, and this is the problem: is if you want to recapture, if you want uh, a golden age for America, it can't be done on a democratic mindset where everyone is equality. You need exceptionalism, you need an exceptional group or one group to be that force. It has to be, I mean, it goes back to the elitist vanguardism. It has to be that one particular group. And, I've been very critical of America and American, Americanisms in Europe and everything. I would say though, in history, when I look at American history, particularly, I mean, for me, one of the fascinations I have with America is the frontiersmen, is people on the frontiers, American independence onwards, up until probably, I'm just trying to think, maybe the 1860s or 70s, when the frontier had largely been settled, the boundaries and everything had been largely been settled and agreed. But that sort of frontier spirit of America, that um, of like a sort of almost like a warrior caste, because that's what, when you have frontiersmen in European civilization societies, they tend to be warriors. They tend to have incredible, vigorous outlooks, and be very having strong leadership positions. Look at the Ulster Scots and the Appalachian Mountains and stuff as one example. Um, sort of as a frontiers people, and you could look at it like in Rome as well. I that's my envision of America, and many people look back as in America when they look at that sort of age of America and say, well, that's the greatest point of America. And it's the people that makes America. It's not so much the ideas, and I think too many people get hooked up on ideas, particularly bad ideas.
Very well said. But I do recognize, people. I was one of the people who would have said, like, America is a democratic republic, that sort of thing. But it may have been that way at one point, but really it is a democracy now, and that's part of its
Yes, it
decline.
is.
So yeah, but let's move back to Britain, because
Yeah.
I think we've covered sort of the American stuff well enough. Now, Britain goes into this election. It's called by Rishi Sunak, who's an unpopular prime minister, maybe probably to get out ahead of reform and try and prevent Nigel Farage from creating a campaign that might overtake the Conservatives. And he does that successfully in some sense. I mean, he does it terribly, but it worked to some degree. The AA would say that the zero seats movement to destroy the Conservative Party wasn't completely, didn't achieve exactly what it wanted to. Though people like AM are, I think, more optimistic in that area, which is weird because he's never optimistic.
Yes, and I agree with AM actually, and I might expand. I do disagree with AA on that point. I agree with AM. The so just to sort of, you're with Rishi Sunak. Number one, it's very important. He was never in the UK. Um, the party members, so your average member of the public who joins a political party, can choose the party leader when you have candidates. Um, the Conservative Party is a bit different because what you do is they have the lead, a candidate has to be a sitting member of Parliament, and that candidate goes through the MPs, the Conservative MPs in the House. So you'll have they'll have a threshold that they have different rounds of voting if there's like several candidates, and it goes down to the final two, and the final two candidates goes back to the members in the larger party. So when Boris left, that happened, and it was between Jeremy Hunt, who was the Chancellor with Rishi Sunak, and Liz Truss. And because Liz Truss was in more of the populist side of things, and Jeremy Hunt is a member of the One Nation, and I'll be talking about the One Nation Conservatives, but then I'll just refer to them as a One Nation, and they're basically like imagine imagine a political ideology of Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney rolled into one. That is your One Nation Conservatives, but without any Christianity or any sort of belief system. It's just pure managerialism, liberalism, like just depth of hell,
Yep.
bad ideas.
Well, Mitt Romney's a Mormon, so it really doesn't count anyways.
Yeah, he's not a real Christian, no. He's just yeah. So that's the One Nation Conservatives, and the One Nation Conservatives. That's basically like your David Cameron. That is makes up quite, I think, like a bulk of the Conservative Party in Parliament. Before the election, and even now, they make up a large percentage. That's like your David Cameron, George Osborne, Jeremy Hunt faction. Um, they primarily are. They primarily in seats in the southeast of England, in the home counties, the Blue Wall, which are like conservative heartland. So these are the places that vote conservative. They vote blue, and for American viewers, blue is conservative and red is for the Labour Party. So blue in this context is you're normally right. I say right wing. I can't call it right wing, but conservative vote, and
Yes.
Labour's your red one. So that when I say red and blue, yeah.
Interesting enough on that point, America, it used to be that way for us. Blue was Republican, red was Democrat. Up until the
Yeah, I think
80.
Yeah, I remember watching I think it was like the 76 election with Carter and Ford, and I remember seeing Carter, like the states that Carter won, going in red column and Ford going in blue, and I think there was I remember seeing somewhere why that changed. I think it was like a news network channel decided to change the colors or something. I don't, for
Yeah,
some reason or another, I don't know why, but
it was CNN said, we're going to try this out. And like this one time, and then later they were like, we're going to do this every time now.
so they determined like the political reality
Yeah,
for
basically
like
they willed the
yeah.
color scheme into existence.
And so hence you had like blue states and red states like from the
Mm-hmm.
90s onwards.
Yep.
Yeah. um yeah, I mean blue and red has sort of been, I mean the blue for the Conservative has been there since its inception. I think it's always been blue. It's always been represented by the color blue. Labour's always been represented by the color red since their inception. Yeah, I would say though, not so much color. So the Conservatives always used to go by the symbol of it's the tree.
An oak.
Before that, it was the oak tree. That's right. Before that, it was a hand with a torch. The Labour has always been the red rose, Rose of England. Um, so that they've always it's sort of been more symbols than colors, but I think ever since the introduction of like the in the last century, it's become more prominent in color schemes as well. But yeah, going back to what happened is basically Liz Truss. She was there as prime minister, and she was only there for a few months. What had happened, and this is where it's interesting, is that in um, in Normieville, right? Let's go to Normieville for a sec. Let's park our car in Normieville, the General Masses Street. And in Normieville, Liz Truss nearly bankrupt. She did a mini budget, um, announcing a new economic plan for the country, basically. And that economic plan, that little budget, nearly destroyed the country, economically speaking, and would make everyone bankrupt and the country return to the Stone Age. Okay, that's Normieville. Now back to back to reality.
Yeah.
I believe she was asking for a it was like a 5p tax cut from the Bank of England. And what had happened is basically because she was not the candidate that the Bank of England wanted, or the permanent bureaucracy in the civil service and the Bank of England didn't want. They fabricated this to do with the gilt markets, which if you go watch Dan at Brokenomics on Lotus Eaters, he will explain it a lot better than I can. But basically, it wasn't a run on the markets. It was the gilts which were returning, and they would return at this point anyway. And what happened? It showed like a downturn in the economy. It was nothing to do with any mini budget or anything, but because it happened they did it at the same time to basically fabricate to the masses that Liz Truss had messed up the economy. And because most people don't understand, including me, fully how economic monetary policy works, they will go along with it because why wouldn't you? And as a result, the conservative, the media, there was a concerted effort by the media, the banks, and the Conservative Party to get her to quit. All her ministers and MPs quit and were demanding her to resign, and so she did because she was just shut out of power. And then they installed Rishi Sunak with no
Rishi really
vote by.
is the like pension master, right? Because somebody said recently that the only thing he could had people voting on for him was their pensions, basically.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's a stop increasing. Yeah, tax on the pensions, and that's how you get your you're over 65s to vote for the Conservative Party. Yeah, that's that's the one line I think the Conservative Party would never cross in an election. That's the
gotcha.
one line they would never. Out of all the things they would cross, that'd be the one line. But don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Liz Truss. I mean, Liz Truss is mental. She kind of fits in with the MAGA Republicans, to be honest. At large,
She's a Thatcherite, isn't she? Really?
she's she's a Thatcherite. She perceives the world through economic liberalism. She's very, very against protectionism and nationalization. And I actually think nationalization in certain instances is actually a good thing. I'm not against it. I think stuff with like the post office in this country, which has been privatized, should be renationalized because why should we have foreign, like a foreign Czech millionaire trying to purchase large parts of our postal system and have some Japanese company doing it. I mean, there's been a few scandals in this country with a Japanese technology firm. This was beforehand, but and then also like our rail networks just don't don't work. The trains don't run on time. And
that's
just
private.
nothing.
The trains are private, but they don't run on time.
Yeah, they have been privatized, and they don't run on time. There is no consistency because there is no repercussion for the owners to improve the system because there's only one like rail network near enough, or there's only one because they do have a connection to the state, but that's only for like negotiation between unions, and unions are quite militant. We've had a series of strikes, and not to mention the NHS, which is another, just a black hole in the UK economy. So much money goes into the NHS, and it's to do with contracts because doctors aren't employed by the NHS; they're on a contract-based system. So it's there is a you just have this system that just doesn't work, and also it's you have on the other level devolution between England, Wales, and Scotland. So the policies, as complex as it is also different because you have different parties running. In England is under under a UK government, so it's under Keir Starmer at the moment. But then Wales, you've got the Welsh Labour, who have their own administration and an assembly, and in Scotland it's under the SNP in the Scottish Parliament as well. So you have these different policies, and we saw it also in COVID response and other response as well. So I mean, the UK just can't work. It can't function because it's been too democratized. I mean, literally, democracy is strangling itself and killing off the nation.
It sounds like Illinois too for me. The state,
Yeah,
Chicago
yeah,
basically runs itself, and it's a mess. And so is the state.
yeah. I mean, from my understanding, most of Illinois is quite rural. Then you got
Mhm.
Chicago, and Chicago basically dictates what the rest of what happens with the rest of the state.
Yep, that's
Just
exactly.
because it's this large biomass of people living in one, in one urban area.
And it gets to dictate itself what it's going to do. So it basically controls the state, and then it also controls itself, and it can't manage either.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, so that's the background, and so yeah, what happened was Rishi Sunak. There was going to be an election this year because the time last election we had, and it was in 2019. In the UK, you have to have an election held every 5 years, so we knew it would be happening this year before Christmas at some point. All pundits, including myself, believed it would happen maybe around October, maybe September, October, not November or December, because it would clash with the US presidential election, and that maybe a lot of people in like NATO and people um, in sort of more multinational circles would be worried that this could cause too much fluctuation in markets and all, whatever their rationale for it was. And but then suddenly he announced coming out into the rain with no umbrella, as people might remember some of that clip,
Very damp.
without any umbrella. Yeah, that he would call a general election. Steve Bray, the pro EU activist with the ridiculous top hat, was playing "Things Can Only Get Better," which is the this theme tune for Tony Blair's '97 general election. Um, and he announced it that he was the election, and then that was it. The election campaign began. I think it was about 2 months before. A lot of people were caught off guard. A lot of his Conservative MPs were caught off guard. Many of them had holidays booked because this was July, so it was like summer holiday season time booked. And Farage. I think because at this time you had Richard Tice running the party. He just kicked out um, Bo from Lotus Eaters, Dan, and others at the orders of Hope Not Hate, because Richard Tice is a ridiculous. I'm not going to swear on your channel, but Richard Tice is a ridiculous man, and he's a complete
Pushover.
coward.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a complete coward. He's a complete pushover, and he's
He's a liberal.
an enemy to. He's a liberal, and he's an enemy to any true British patriot because he gives in to radical communists, and anybody who gives in to radical communists should share the fate of. I won't go any further, but yeah, you should share the fate of all bad people.
You
In
guys
my
could learn
view.
a lot from American politics. We have when we have a primary, whoever wins the primary, that's it. That person's on the ballot. Like there's no leader any higher up that could remove them.
Yeah, yeah. I say that's the one thing this says: they will not allow a primary system, because otherwise the people like Tice would go. But effectively what was happening was Tice was clearing house to make sure Lotus Eaters fellas, people on the internet, right? So us lot wouldn't be on there saying not naughty things and thinking naughty things and even talking about naughty things and not being good little uh good little gimps for the establishment. So that's what happened. Yeah, and the campaign kicked off. After about a week, I believe Farage, because he went on like a question time panel show, where he said he was going to go off to America. He wasn't going to get involved in the campaign. I remember, I think it was Piers Morgan, like had a go at him about not stick it out, and then the campaign went on. Rishi Sunak was just making gaff after gaff. Um, it looked to be very boring. It was obvious at this point that Labour were going to win, have a big majority in all the polling. And then suddenly, Farage came back onto the scene, announced that he was the leader of the party, that Richard Tice has stepped aside, and that he was going to stand, and Farage was going to stand in the Clacton-on-Sea constituency in Essex. For Reform Party, and this was quite a big boost in the polls. I mean, they were in like 10, I think 7 or 8%, and because of Farage intervention, he went up in the polls, and they started getting into the 15-16% of the vote, which doesn't sound like a lot, and people listening might say, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. Actually, because we have multiple parties, and I mean multiple parties, we have a lot of parties. Some seats could have up to 7 different candidates standing, and so 15-16% could actually win you several seats, which it did, because as we know, Farage won his seat. And also I think Reform, they've got 5 or 6 MPs now.
I thought it was just 5.
One of the Northern Irish MPs, the TUV MP, is now sitting with the Reform Party. They had like an
Really?
alliance.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's sitting with them, the TUV. They're the ultra Protestant unionist. They won Ian Paisley's seat, so
Who's Ian
yeah,
Paisley?
no more
Was he,
Catholics.
was he a conservative, or what was he? Labor?
No, so you had Ian Paisley Jr., who is Ian Paisley was a Northern Irish politician who passed away back in 2013, I think. He was in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. He was the face of Ulster Protestantism and the face of the Unionist movement in Northern Ireland. He was the founder of the Democratic Unionist Party, which has been the largest Unionist party in Northern Ireland for probably about 20 odd years now. Yeah, he was the face of that. He I think he confronted. I think the only thing that's notable internationally that he did was he confronted Pope John Paul II in the European Parliament by calling him, basically saying there should be no papist here, no papist
Uh,
here. You're the Antichrist or
Wait,
something.
is that when
Um,
Otto von Habsburg punched him in the face?
I think somebody. I think he may have chucked papers at him. I remember
No,
somebody chucking papers at, and John Paul was sort of looking and sort of like, "What was the deal with this guy?"
no, I'm pretty sure
Um,
Otto von Habsburg punched him in the face as he tried to, as they kicked him out of Parliament, or the European
let me.
Parliament.
Yeah, yeah. There was like a tussle between him and the Haps. Yeah, there was a tussle
Yeah.
between him. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and yeah. So that was him. Yeah. So I'm not going to talk about Northern Ireland politics in this, because Northern Ireland's politics is the parties like the Conservative Party and Labour don't stand. Well,
Okay.
they do stand. It's complex, but they're not. Liberal Democrats, Conservative Labour aren't present in any major way. In Northern Ireland, it's between Protestant Unionists and Catholic nationalists. So your Sinn Féin types, and then your Democratic and Unionist. And there's so many. You got the DUP, you got the UUP, and the TUV, and the PCP, and the PUP. And yeah, I'm not going to go into the. Yeah,
PCP, are they a drug?
it was like, what was it? The populist? No, sorry, it's not the PC. It's the PUP. I'm talking about, the Popular
Okay,
Unionist
that's
Party.
better. PCP is a drug.
It's a drug. Yeah, that was it. I thought it was a drug. Yeah, it's a heck of a drug. Um, yeah, so you have these different. Yeah, the Northern Ireland's very complex. But going back to the UK. So the campaign begun. Um, it was boring. and then Farage came in, and it all changed, because then the topic, because at that point the the conversation was very much controlled by Labour and Keir Starmer's team. It was very much controlled, you know, but that the Tories had lost control of the country, the economy, nothing was working, which was true. It was true, and you know that was his strongest point. And then they went into usual political back and forth, you know, the kayfabe or what have you. The Conservatives' response was, look at our track record on, you know, this and that, very PowerPoint, you know, bullet points, this, that, and the other. And then Reform came along, and the topic became about immigration, and even, there was even on the topic of the demographics, which was quite interesting, because that's something that in Britain hasn't been in any major circles, any major like mainstream circles, ever even really brought up. Not since the BNP days, which was the British Nationalist Party back in the early 2000s. They were a nationalist party. They were largely a white British nationalist party. So they would obviously talk about that, mainly about Islam and the rise of Asian populations in parts of England.
Doesn't
Mainly like,
Farage is very proud about him destroying the BNP, right?
yeah, he's very much. He said that several times that UKIP, when he was leading UKIP, destroyed the BNP, and basically, in his worldview, contained, took like the more, the good. Not this is, but his sort of idea is that he took the BNP, made a lot of them campaigned back in the day, and I do remember that it was on the EU, the EU membership at the time, because they were Eurosceptic. They had representation in the European Parliament, the BNP, as well as, I mean, Nick Griffin, the leader at the time, he was in the European Parliament, and you also had the many councils. You had councils from all the way from Rotherham all the way down to the outer boroughs of London, like Dagenham, where you had a large BNP presence, many councillors elected to the councils in those areas, which had a large enough white population in contact with Asian Muslim population. And the BNP at the time were also, what made them different than many others is that while they were quite hostile to the Asian Muslim stuff and sort of along the white nationalist line, they were also very, very much hostile to Zionism, and even other elements of that as well, which the sort of direct Jewish influence and all that. But yeah, and that's what Farage is. When he says he's proud, that's what he's proud of doing. He takes like the Eurosceptic element, the immigration element. He'll take that, but all other elements of nationalism in that is chucked
Beyond the
aside. And you'll
pale.
see some like, yeah, and you'll see like I talked about Jonathan Bowden. He was involved in the BNP, but he sort of went. He was a bit of an individual rogue character, more of a philosopher speaker type. And he'll talk about how basically at this time, because this is where the BNP there was infighting. I'm not going to go into the internal politics of it, because there's many people in our circles that have vastly different memories and recollections of why their political organization collapsed. But I think there was like a deliberate media intervention to make UKIP, because they were more palatable, make UKIP the and Farage the new figures in that circles, and everyone, and the BNP were cut out completely. And that's what happened. That party died off, and UKIP rose up, and Farage, well, we all know the history from there. But going back to now, the campaign, it was so focused on immigration, which was strange, because at the start of it wasn't even mentioned, even though the majority of the population, you just know that was the main problem. Because again, since lockdown, since 2020, or since Brexit and 2016 and 2020, we've had in this country record, and I mean un unbelievable levels of immigration, and not just illegal immigration, the small boats that cross the channel, but legal immigration from Africa, from Asia, from all over the world, from even like Latin America. We've had recent Colombian gang trouble, not from far from where I live, where there's been bodies found in suitcases. Um, and this has and this isn't just cities. This is in the numbers now. They are in rural setting. They're in rural parts of England where this was never the case, a few years ago.
Hmm.
um and this happened under the Conservatives' watch, and this is why a lot of people are angry. This is why you have zero seats. This is why you have all of this. And the state of our the high streets have drastically declined. um Everywhere is, you've got boarded up shops, you've got charity shops, you've got phone shops, you've got like these cheap tacky shops now. You've got corrupt councils who can't function, are more interesting about saving money. You've got you just got a country which doesn't work. And reform, their big thing that they said was, we are reform, and Britain doesn't work, we need reform. That was their catchphrase, and I thought it was a very good catchphrase. I think it actually did hit home something. And there was a political propaganda piece by Nigel Farage where he was with his like Labrador in some Essex field, or somewhere where he lived, and he was sort of sitting down and saying, basically what Starmer had sort of been saying, but expanding on it, in not in a managerial statistical way when you're explaining the economic impact, but he was talking about more in a civilizational, cultural way, which was really refreshing, because there was no other candidate who, even in any of their political propaganda pieces, actually talked about it in that the state of the country in that way.
Hmm.
And it was really refreshing to see. And I think, it's one of the I rank it as the best party political broadcast that I've seen in my lifetime. It was very good and very well done, and I think it would have touched people. It definitely engaged some people, because it, you know, again, it helped with the poll numbers. Um, and with Rishi Sunak, with his campaign, um, it does appear to be some levels of deliberate gaffes. I mean, you had like the D-Day stuff. He left the D-Day um, uh, D-Day events early to do an interview with ITV. That caused a big scandal here. And Farage said something rather interesting. He said, "Well, effectively along the lines is." He has no ties to this country, so why would he feel anything, or something along to that effect? You remember, I think he says he had no ties to this country. He doesn't understand, or he doesn't understand the culture of this country, or something like that, which was implying because he's an Indian, he doesn't have that same cultural. He's a Hindu. He's not Christian. He's not Anglican. He's not natively British. He's not English. So he doesn't have that same level of ties. And I thought that was an interesting tactic he went with. Labour did it in a soft way, and they did it in a soft way in some of their imagery in their campaign posters, as I predicted a few years ago. Um, that they would go along, they would sort of play on the race element of it. Keir Starmer's cabinet and his campaigning videos were all full of white Brits. Same with Reform. It was only the Conservative propaganda videos and party political ones that were filled with very, very diverse, faces. A bit like the RNC the other day.
And my
And
understanding was that Rishi Sunak tried to make the election sort of a war election, or surrounding the draft and everything like that, as well as Ukraine.
yeah, it was he started, one of the first things he said, that there would be a military draft, but then he sort of walked it back a bit, because he said, well, what's the so everyone will have to do it, and it's like, well, there can be exemptions, because they said a draft basically means people will be forced to. If they refuse, they go to prison.
Yeah.
That's what happened in the Second World War. If you refuse, you go to prison. Um, if you were like a Quaker or a pacifist in any way, you would you could be given the choice to do like non-combative roles or something like that. But if you straight up refuse, you go to prison. And he said, well, actually, no, it's going to be more like you're going to help out in society. You can do like this civic commissar position where you help out on the farms and society, and it's like and then Jeremy Clarkson, who uh, was the presenter on Top Gear. I think, do you
And
know who Jeremy Clarkson is?
oh yeah, Clarkson's Farm is one of the best
Clarkson's
shows
Farm.
on
Yeah,
right now.
he yeah, he put a tweet out saying young people don't need to do military and all this stuff. That we should send them to the farms and work the fields because of we will have to rely on mass immigration. And then he had like all these memes of like Comrade Clarkson, the 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 proles will go into the fields, and they will reap the harvest for the great, the great and merciful leader and all that sort of.
There was
I
some
mean, the thing
hilarious
that was in some.
there were some hilarious leftists being like, what you want slavery, Jeremy?"
Yeah, that was. I mean, I mean, he's right though. That would be. I mean, that would be a good idea for like the agricultural side. I
Well,
would
that's
not be against, because number one,
it's better for
I just going to
them
say,
to like work like that.
yeah. I mean, the young people who would be doing that are economically inactive anyway. So I mean, it wouldn't have any impact on the economy so much in that regard. But yeah, I mean, um,
Well, they might appreciate the
the army
farmers
stuff.
more.
Yeah, they would. But I mean, on the whole, it's a good thing, because I forget about it, because it didn't last. It lasted about a couple of weeks really, but it didn't. They emitted. I think it was one of his ministers of the James Cleverly, who said, "Oh, actually, yes, it would be unenforceable. You can just opt out of it." And it's like, well, it's not a conscription then. It's not a draft. It's not a conscription if you just opt out of it, because then everyone will opt out of it. So it was complete farce what they were suggesting, and it was just complete nutty, ridiculous behaviour. Um, and then you had this other scandal which rocked the Conservatives during the campaign. We're sort of mid towards the end of the campaign at this point, Connor. So give you a quick timeline events here, right? Um, there was this scandal that a Conservative MP, a candidate, his wife, and Rishi Sunak's his special branch security, which is basically Britain's Secret Service, right? Officer,
Yep.
um, had gone to betting agents and put bets on when the general election would take place, and they put down the 4th of July. This is before it was announced. We actually know, so we don't know what date they put down. Everyone assumed 4th of July. Anyway, this was a scandal in the media that the media put out there, and um, while this is going on, the Conservative campaign team decided to put out on Twitter a massive roulette wheel, right? A bet, like a Las Vegas style roulette wheel, with Labour saying saying, basically, Keir Starmer saying, don't let um, Keir Starmer bet the economy down the drain or something like that. Anyway, but because there was the betting scandal and the roulette wheel, it didn't go down with people very well, because it just made it look stupid, that given the scandal going on. And there's quite a few people that there were. I believe the candidates involved, the whip was removed from them, so they were no longer Conservative Party members as candidates. The special branch officer was being investigated. I think there was a few more people implicated, and then it came out that you had Conservative candidates who were MPs who were betting that they would lose their seats in the general election. Yeah, this happened. They were betting on losing their seats, and even saying that they were hoping to. I mean, um, Steve Baker, who was economically, again, Thatcherite, but socially a complete and utter coward and liberal, who blocked me on Twitter, by the way, because I, I just said, I said, what was it? Oh yeah, I said it was about like the declining poll rates, and I said maybe if you were gayer and more anti-white, maybe your poll numbers will go up or something like that. And he blocked me for saying that, but yeah. So he was having this sort of minor hissy fit as well. Um, I mean, I cannot tell you the caliber of your average Conservative MP. I mean, they're just cartoonish. They're either cartoon villains or slapstick comedian, like moronic, just people who constantly, but they behave like Scooby Doo villains. Darn it, I would have got away with it if it went for kids and all that. I mean, it's ridiculous. These people. Anyway, that happened. You then had TV debates. You had you had debates between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, and nothing much of value because they just filled the audience with party members.
And they were
It,
able to
the,
keep Nigel Farage out, which is kind of, I thought they were going to have to let him in.
Yeah, well, the polling suggests, because at one point he overtook the Conservatives in the polling, and it was like, actually, a vote for the Conservative Party is a vote for Labour because you're splitting the vote, and you're not allowing reform in. Yeah, I thought so as well, but Farage was relegated to the smaller party division, where you had Labour and Conservatives there, but they didn't have the leaders. It was other representatives of the party. And in those ones, basically, Farage wiped the floor with all of them. It was great to watch, good sound bites. The SNP one just came across as a total and utter prat. I mean, I cannot tell you, my joy in this election. The SNP were wiped out because they are just, they are the they represent the worst virtues of Celtic identity. Like Sinn Féin, it's this it's this like this this communist victimhood, progressive woke, whatever you want to call it, just this identity, and they're just fake nationalists. I mean, they're just fake nationalists as well. They are internationalists. Their entire thing is just anti-Britain, but in reality, they're it's Brits out but Somalians in. That's their worldview in one go.
Internationalists that hate the English.
Yeah, they're internationalists that hate England, and also they hate their own Scottish identity, because during BLM, they went to great works of changing the names and even removing some statues of notable Scottish individuals, especially during the 18th, 19th century, who were prominent in literature, science, exploration, military. I mean, take your pick. Even William Wallace was targeted by the mob. So yeah, I mean, I mean, the SNP are just a bunch of benefit grabbing, uh, benefit grabbing parasites. Quite frankly, they are parasite. They are a parasite on Britain. Them and Sinn Féin. They are parasites on this country, and Plaid Cymru for that matter. All of them. They're just absolute parasitical scumbags. Really are just the worst of the worst.
So Nigel Farage took this campaign that was seemingly meant to be about war and drafting or whatever, and turned it into immigration. But then it came back to war with Ukraine
Yeah,
because Nigel Farage was attacked for being friendly with Putin or something.
Yeah, so let's get in our circles for the last since the where was the when was the invasion of Ukraine? It was 2022,
Um,
or was it
yeah.
2023?
Well, it ended COVID, so whenever COVID,
Yeah,
let me
it all blurs into one. That BLM with Ukraine, Trump,
let's see.
January 6th.
2020 was COVID. 2021 was COVID. Yeah, it had to be like beginning of 2022, I think.
Yeah, I would think so as well. So that happened, um, and over like that 2 year period, it became clear by some of us, especially people who are more into the geopolitical stuff and are critical of NATO and the West as a whole. We're able to look at what really went on in Ukraine. Um, a bit like Peter Hitchens, and we'll get on to Peter Hitchens as well because he plays another role in this story as well. Um, and we look at the what gone on, and of course the real war started in 2014. It started because uh, there was a coup, um, in the presented as a revolution where the government was removed, and there appears to be some CIA involvement. If you believe the documents, which I I, I don't know, it's up to you, but in my mind there was a coup. The quote unquote pro-Russian government was removed from Ukraine, and the pro-Western government was put in there. As a response, you had a breakaway in the eastern Ukraine states because they're more ethnically and socially identify as Russian,
Mhm.
with Russia, and so you had these breakaway states. You had Donetsk and Lusensk, People's Republics, and then you had, of course, the Russian, um, sort of quiet invasion. I call it quiet invasion because it wasn't declared as one. It's just suddenly these no visible markings of national flags turned up in Crimea, and then took the entire uh, Crimean Peninsula. Um, and it was then they had this referendum, and because Crimea again, it's populated by overwhelmingly percentage of Russian people, they voted to join the Russian Federation. So that's how it happened. And then you had like this war between Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, Western Ukraine government, and these separatist forces in the east. Um, and then, as that we had the invasion, and so we've all been very critical of that. Um, and then we've looked at what Zelensky has done, the attack on Christianity in Ukraine, the attack on the Orthodox traditions in Ukraine, um, the creation of this of like removal of like Russian liturgy in the Orthodox churches there. A lot of things that have been, I think, justifiably critical, and also the banning of opposition. That's another thing.
Yeah, there's no
Um,
there. I mean, Zelensky is more or less a dictator at this point.
Yeah, straight up dictator, and he's determined what the state religion is. He's determined who can sit in parliament. He's determined all things, and also the conscription as well. They're literally having people with mental disabilities on the front line. I mean, it's quite horrific, some of the stuff that's been going on there.
Yeah, because they
Anyway,
basically lost their manpower. Anyways, but can you bring this to
yeah,
Nigel
yeah. So
Farage?
far, so in Normieville, okay, let's go back to Normieville. Let's pull up back to Normieville a minute, okay? Yeah, in our car in Normieville, what happened is evil Putler invaded Ukraine. He's there to commit ethnic genocide and to promote evil Putler ideology, which is radical far rightism. The poor Ukrainian people uh, they're all by themselves. We got to come in and help them, like the Rebel Alliance. We would take on the Death Star, quite literally. Um, and this is a battle, Connor. This is a battle between good and evil, and we're always on Team Good. And fortunately, Connor, Team Evil is always the West's opponents. Isn't that convenient?
That's
So
shocking.
um, Team Evil is the West's opponents. And so because of this, we are now, in Normiville, the 2 years of, Ukraine's going to win. Ukraine must win. Ukraine is going to win. Putin's on the ropes. Putin's on the ropes. The Russian army's going to collapse any day now. And this is what's been going on in mainstream media publications in the UK. We've had, I remember at the start of the war, we had all these military experts saying the Russian army is going to collapse, that the supply lines are going to collapse. And of course, 2 years later, and they'd like give it weeks and months, and of course, that never happened. It's one of the reasons why I went off to search other content creators, people like Judge Knapp and other people like that online who seem to have real military guys, John Mearsheimer as well, who understand the region, understand the military, because they worked in intelligence agencies and stuff, so they understand all these different things. And so I was able, like many of us on the right, in our circles, we were able to look at the reality of what was going on the ground, where effectively it's gone to very slow moving trench warfare, stalemate, and actually Ukraine is the reality is Ukraine is a very small country compared to Russia on manpower, economy, and also manpower. And if we're absolutely honest, like in most cases in history, the small nations next to big, huge powers have to come to terms that they are, subservient to those powers in one way or another. And that's just the political reality of all things, throughout human history, right? And as a result, there's been no discussion in Normiville of any chance that Ukraine is either doing, Zelensky is a dictator, like you said, or they're doing anything wrong. And so when Farage had that interview and he said, actually, the West very much caused large parts of the conflict. Zelensky is not, that we're wasting money there. We need to be. I mean, I think Farage, his take is like with Trump. He wants to do a peace deal at this point because the death toll is too high. The money that is going from the US and the UK is ridiculous at this point. It's just being thrown down the drain at this point.
It's a black
And
hole.
yeah, the black hole is only better benefiting. I don't want to sound like a leftist when I say this, but it's only benefiting the arms dealers and people like that. But there's people in the permanent bureaucracy of the state. It's only benefiting in that regard.
I'm not sure that's
Anyway,
leftism at this point.
yeah, I mean, old school leftists would say this, so that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel cringe saying it, but it's true. It's true, isn't it? I mean, at this point, it's true at this point. And for everyone went, the media class in this country went mental. He was compared to Lord Haw, who was a collaborator with the Nazi regime in Germany. He was compared to a turncoat, to Quisling. I mean, Quisling was a Norwegian collaborator with the Germans in Norway. I mean, they went all out. And they were all out attack on him because this view hadn't been aired, unlike it hadn't been normalized, and so this was a real jolt to the system. And I think this was used. The Tories used it as a way saying that he was a traitor. He won't stand up to Putin. He's weak and all that. Bearing in mind, Cameron, when he went to stand up to Putin over Crimea back in the day at the Winter Olympics in 2014, I think it was, his big political gambit, Cameron's big political gambit with Putin was, at least we treat our gays right. At least we have like women's rights and stuff. I mean,
Yeah, you're
it's
not gay
just,
enough.
yeah. And I see somebody in the chat doesn't agree with our take on this, and
To be honest, I don't know if it's satire or not. He might be joking.
might be joking, but you can't present yourself as a beacon of democracy and then, you know, not have elections and like ban the church, like arrest like Orthodox priests. I mean, that's, you know,
Yeah,
you can't play you can't play the poor oppressed and then like oppress your own people, because if you were legitimate, if it was legitimate, you wouldn't need to do that. You wouldn't need to have like uh paramilitary forces, you know, forcing people to stay in line if you're, you know, in this scenario.
yeah.
um
Now, at this point, Farage, his campaign was doing really well. He was sort of neck and neck with the conservatives, but then Reform had a sort of a diversity campaign that they went for. Is that correct?
so no, what happened, not, I'm just trying to think. Diverse. What do you mean? They had like diverse candidates or
They had
something?
like an ad all about their diversity. It's like I'm
Yeah. Oh,
Reform, of course we're diverse. It's a TikTok thing. Oh, okay. I
yeah.
guess
So,
my real name is being serious. Okay.
oh,
Anyways,
he
continue.
is serious.
I guess.
um, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So what happened with that is you had Richard Tice, who again, he produced a television propaganda piece, where he talked about diversity, how reform isn't racist. We have Sikhs, we have Buddhists, we have Oriental peoples, we've got African, West Africans, we've got all these like different groups of people supporting us. And at the same time, Farage did his own propaganda piece where he was meeting British people, like real British people and everything. And if you compare the two, um, very stark difference. And um, fortunately, the one that Tice didn't seem to get many sort of, apart from us on our circles, in our circles, the Tice's one didn't garner much attention in the general public. It got ridiculed on social media and the usual places, as you can imagine, but it didn't, it didn't really garner much attention otherwise. Um, but um, uh, I think the one I mentioned with Farage and his Labrador as well was also included in this at the same time. So Farage, because Farage is who he is, he's Farage. He gets the main. He has center stage on all of this. But I do think in this campaign, that with Reform, Tice was definitely holding back Farage massively from achieving greater number in the polls, because turnout at this election was the lowest it ever been. I think it was incredibly low turnout on the whole, and I think a lot of people who would vote Reform or voted UKIP in the past or voted Brexit in the past just didn't bother turning out to vote because they the energy wasn't there enough. There was energy behind Farage in some regard, but there wasn't enough energy for um there wasn't enough energy because Tice was basically snuffing out that energy and returning to like silly boomer conservative, look at us, we're diverse, talking points. And that is what did it harm in the long run, I think. I think without that, Reform could have got more votes and would have got more seats. But
Yeah.
we shall see.
Well, also so you've got sort of Farage, who's not really doing the boomer talking points, and then Tice, who can't avoid doing the boomer talking points. But anyway, so for, they have they win 5 seats. They now have 6, I guess. What you said is true. And Labor has a vast majority, and the Tories, the Conservatives, didn't get 0 seats, but they're like 150 or something like that.
Yeah, they got 131, I think, in the end.
Okay. Well, let's talk about sort of the sort of the party, each party sort of afterwards.
Yeah,
Labor seems to be trying to be competent. In some ways,
yeah,
almost sort of right wing in some ways, because of their, I believe, Labor is planning on uh, deporting deporting foreign criminals, which is kind of interesting. That
yeah.
um,
So yeah, so just the results when they came in, Labour got 30. So this is what happened. Labour got 413 seats, I think. Um, the Conservatives got 131, Liberal Democrats got 72, and then you had Reform that got 5, and you had like Green Party got a similar amount, and you have your various nationalist party, and then you have there was a couple independents that got elected who were pro-Palestine types, effectively ethnic voting bloc candidates for Asian. And by the way, people might be confused. When I say Asian, I don't mean like Chinese or Korean. I know that's Americans might think I'm referring to those. I'm actually referring to people like when Asian in Britain usually means to people from Pakistan, Bangladesh, or India.
gotcha.
Um, not the Oriental people. That's Oriental is what we refer to as people from China and the Far East. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
so yeah, Labour got I think they only increased their share of the vote by like 0.6%
I thought Labor
overall.
lost 5% vote wise. I thought wasn't
Uh,
under Corbyn 40%, and now it was 35.
yeah, that was 2017 results. In 2017 they got hold on a sec, let me have a look. I'm just going to confirm. Just going to look at the general election. You may be right. Yeah. So what happened? What happened in? Yeah. So what happened in 2017? Corbyn got 40% of the vote, right?
Yeah.
He got 40% or just over 40% of the vote. In 2019, when Boris got his majority and Labour had a bit of a thrashing,
Oh,
Labour went down to 32%, right? 32% of the vote. Um, in So that was the lowest. 32% of the vote is very low for Labour. It's the lowest it's been in they lost many seats now because of the way that because we have first past the post like you have in America. Whoever gets more votes than the other candidate wins. We don't have it like the European system where it's proportional. So you have proportional representation, different rounds of voting. Labour only increased their share of the vote by 1.7%. So they got the Keir Starmer's got 33.7% of the vote, 9 million votes. The Conservatives lost 19.9% of the vote. Majority of that went to Reform. But because of the way that it works on the constituency level, how they each vote, it resulted in Labour getting 411 votes and the Conservatives getting 121. I actually gave them an extra 10. They only got 121. 6 million votes. Also, bearing in mind the turnout was lower as well. So the turnout I think was it 59.9, which is low. It's low in UK. That's low in UK general elections. And so because of this, effectively Labour didn't really achieve much at all. In many ways, Labour in some constituencies, Labour actually went backward, especially with the larger Muslim voting areas where they lost seats, and some of their candidates who were instrumental in a Keir Starmer government nearly lost their seats. I mean, one of them did. Jonathan Ashworth, who was a frequent face in the campaign, lost his seat to a pro-Gaza candidate type. And the campaign as a whole was organised by this chap called Mick Sweeney and a former civil servant called Sue Gray, who was Boris Johnson's ethics advisor, and she basically turned on the Conservative government, quit the civil service. The civil service, by the way, are meant to be politically impartial and neutral. They're not to do nothing to do with politics. They work as basically the functionaries of government. But she quit her position, joined the Labour Party, and then became instrumental in planning Keir Starmer's government. And their campaign was to reconnect with it. It was a mix of Blairism. They agreed with the concept of Blairism that you have to not be like ridiculous, like left-wing radicals. You have to reconnect with the traditional working class voter base. And that means straight, as AA would say, you strafe right. So you appear socially right on certain issues and then economically left on others. And on paper that usually works, but because of Farage and him being present, it didn't work out fully. Now, overall, Labour are in a difficult position because yes, they got 411 seats. They have, they have a super majority, a super like a Tony Blair level style seat majority. But in reality, there's all these constituencies they won are quite marginal. They're not these huge majorities. It was close. Reform came second in over 100. So it, they're at this point where they haven't got the mandate to do all the their mandate is basically to be boring managers, and that's what they're sort of selling thing. But this is where it's getting interesting because Labour now, the Labour government, have gone rogue on certain things against Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair, as you know, has been pushing for digital ID. He's very much instrumental in governing affairs in West and particularly in Britain, and very much instrumental in helping Starmer purge the Labour Party from radical left-wing activists loyal to Corbyn. And Sue Gray and this Mick Sweeney have actually sort of done a knives out for Blair. They're sort of going against the Dark Lord's wishes, and if at the moment they are they went against digital ID. I think there's a potential clash coming up on another Blair project on energy. I'm not too fully versed in that. I'll have to check it out. But so far they're going against Blair, and Blair has many eyes and ears in the British establishment and in the Labour Party, particularly MPs. If Keir continues down this road, he may face the same fate as Boris and Liz Truss and many others. Also, because of the supermajority, there are many different. There's still factionalism in the Labour Party. If you have like Starmerites, who are a factional split from Blairites, and also you still have like your Corbynite light types there, represented by Angela Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, the ginger lady with the big breasts.
Aren't they
for the
trying
American audiences?
Aren't they trying to get rid of her?
Yeah. Basically, yeah, they're trying to get rid of her.
And Starmer could do that at any point, right? I mean, theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically he could, but it would cause massive splits in the party, and
Sure.
this is the problem, because in many ways, the larger the party, the more faction. I mean, uh, it's difficult. I don't know if I can. Have you like has the Democrat Party or the Republican ever had in recent history um, um, a factional split that could like split the party or cause like make it inefficient? You know, make the party not collapse, but totally inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, the only things I can think of are on certain topics, but the parties kind of have to stick together because there's no because it's a two-party system. They have no choice. Like they're almost
Okay, yeah,
they're forced to work together. The closest thing you get to is like, oh, they disagree on, like, a few people disagree on who should become Speaker of the House, or you know, like they, because they're like, you guys, I believe the government party has, like, you've got whips, like, basically controlling who, um you know whether or not everybody votes for, a certain thing, right? That a
yeah.
certain
So
bill or something.
yeah, so the party, so the whips are represented. Each party has their own whip, right?
Yeah,
So you have the larger the party, the more whips you have. So the Conservatives will have several whips. You'll have Labour, the government will have their whips, and you'll have Liberal Democrats. Reform may have, I mean, they have 5 MPs, so then they may have like Farage will be the whip, or so, I don't know. And basically, the whip's job is to make sure that the party, everyone in parties on the same page when it comes to voting for bills, and they vote. So the main function is the opposition party will vote against the government's bill, and the ruling government's whips will make sure that everyone, all of the MPs, so all the 411 Labour MPs, vote for bills. And you do have there's different degrees of whips, right? So you have one where you have like your free vote. So basically, you can vote with a can, because technically the way that this works in the UK is you don't vote for the party, you're meant to vote for the candidate, right?
yeah,
The party is incidental, but in reality, you're voting for the party. Everyone votes for the party. They don't vote for candidates. Um, but in you have like your free vote, and then you have your first line whip, where okay, if you vote against the government, you'll be marked down for it. You'll be marked. If you vote against your party, you'll be marked down for it. And then you have your second whip, where you can get penalised, and then you have your three-line whip. Now, the three-line whip is basically if you don't vote for the party, or if you don't vote for the governing party, if you're a member of the like Labour Party, you don't vote for the government, you will be kicked out the Labour Party, or you'll be kicked out the party.
yeah. We don't
And
really
those
have that.
No, and that's usually those three-line whips are only used for really, really crucial government bills. Um, I think one of the Brexit bills was used for that. If you voted against it, then I think of some Conservative MPs were kicked out of the party because of it. So
Because
yeah,
I imagine because it would sort of bring down the government in certain situations.
yeah. Um, I think I
Well,
mean, like obviously the Canadian and Australian, New Zealand parliaments have a similar. I mean, it's an identical system near enough.
I'm not saying we don't have whips in the sense of people who are supposed to, their job is supposed to, but we don't have people being removed. Like, it doesn't, that's not how that works. Like, it's, I don't think there's ever been anybody removed by their party. The party, like, you can leave your party in America and join a different party, or you can become independent, but the whips are more just their job is to make sure it, they in America, just that everybody's on the same page, but there's no like enforcement mechanism. I don't think.
No, no.
But you guys do, because your whole system is based on parliament.
Yes, that's right. You can lose the whip. Um, I mean, there were several occasions as well in the last Parliament when before the election you had a a handful of Conservative MPs who defected to the Labour Party. That happens. Defecting to other parties. Happened with Reform, with the
Lee
MP for
Anderson.
Ashfield, Lee Anderson. Yeah, um, I know that's happened in America. You've had Democrats that have become Republicans and Republicans become Democrats, vice versa.
Mostly
Um,
like independents. Like we don't have that many, like unless it's afterwards, like people get out of office and then have to run, like might switch
yeah.
parties after. They
I,
don't tend to switch parties too much when they're actually in office,
oh, okay. Um,
unless
again, I'm
independent.
just trying. Yeah, I mean, I know when you had, there's been several points in the Democrat Party. You had like the Southern Democrats, Dixiecrats types who split. I think it was in '48 and in '68 there was like or they were called the American Independents then, but you had like a revolt by Southern Democrats in on those two occasions.
But they didn't
Um,
switch, like the Dixiecrats didn't switch parties. Most of them were, or maybe one. There might have been one that switched parties back in the day, but I believe most of them stayed Democrat, even though the party had changed so much.
yeah, and it was 2010. Like I think the last vestiges of Democrat presence in particularly like in some of the southern states like Alabama, for example, it was 2010. And this is quite interesting because I've always been interested in what when people talk about like the switch, the Democrat Republican switch in each state. If you look at the 2010 midterms, that's when you see on the local level, not so much the presidential but on like a state level, congressional level, you see the switch from like Democrat and Republican. I mean, John says, yeah. Also, in 1994, you start to see that you see a dramatic shift in that. But I think it was really in 2010 you saw that saw more uh, rural areas voting Republican and suburban and urban areas voting Democrat became more and more cemented.
Well, Republican and Democrat politics in America weren't so much ideological, I don't think. I mean, there were ideological times, but it really was like a party thing. So that's why so many Southerners remained Democrat for so long, is basically because you're basically put on a track and you rarely get off of it. Just just
Yeah,
like
I
just
was
like
told.
these conservative voters that voted, conservative, even though reform probably fits their belief system much better.
Yeah, yeah, they're sort of stuck in that. They're stuck in that mentality that sort of misleading. I mean, going back to the Conservatives, we talked about Labour, like what's happening with Labour. So Labour's government's on the clash with Tony Blair. So I think I know who'll win that one. Um, the Conservatives, so basically, the Conservatives, yeah, they're down to 121 seats. Massive loss for them.
Liz Truss
Worse
got
than lo-
voted out.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them got voted out. A lot of the um I guess ones that appeared on the Lotus Eaters, I think all of them got booted. A lot of people, MPs got booted, and now the Conservative Party seems to be dominated by um uh they seem to be dominated by One Nation Conservatives. And the One Nation Conservatives, I mean, originally the One Nation Conservatives goes back to, I believe, the 1922 election, and the idea was you unite the work. I guess you could say the part of the working class and upper classes together, basically creating this, the one nation conservatives, and uh, you had this. Uh, Now they basically become the social liberal wing they were the social liberal ruling wing of the conservatives. um they like, Thatcherite economic policies, but effectively they've become more and more um socially liberal. Benjamin Disraeli, first of all. Yeah, that might be what I was thinking of, actually, the Disraeli. But effectively, it started off something completely probably different from what we have today,
Hmm.
and it resulted in um, uh, effectively like your Republican rhinos, right? Um, and they ultimately adopted Blairism. And that's the sort of main takeaway, is that all these One Nation conservatives, Michael Gove, David Cameron, Jeremy Hunt, they're all devotees of the New Labour project that was created in the 90s and the early 2000s. Um, and much of their belief is to continue that new Britain that was created. Um, and I jokingly said before the election that these One Nations, they will view a defeat on this scale if they got below 100 seats, like the 0 seats. They would straight up say, "Well, we were too far right. We weren't left wing enough." And it turns out that's basically that. Plus, people like Rory Stewart, who does a podcast with um, um, well, John, you're saying they're not pro free market, but that's what, and I'm not saying that's what they are. You need to listen a bit more clearly. I was claiming that's what they declare themselves to be. That's what Cameron declared themselves to be. But they openly declare themselves to be socially liberal and economically Thatcherite. That's sort of like their stick. That is their whether that's how they do policy. Obviously they don't, because they've not really even done that bit right. If we look at Rishi Sunak and what happened with lockdown, I mean, any economic Thatcherism or anything like that, they abandoned that in the last few years anyhow. um
Yeah, and if you want a more detailed sort of history of this, uh, Apostolic Majesty was on Dan's show of the Lotus Eaters, um, on what's it called, Brokenomics. So go check that out if you want a more, historical depth regarding One Nation conservatives. But yeah, so they're basically uh, they've become leftists. They're the true believers of the Blair Project
yeah,
nowadays.
there's leftists, and their greatest achievements is gay marriage. Their greatest achievements is transitioning, children. It's opening up the secularization of society, the imports of new Britons, the erosion of culture that is exclusive, because race and culture is exclusive force. So because it has to be, it has to be separate. So everything, the one thing they will all say is the greatest virtue of what is like the virtue of Britain. What's the one greatest virtue of Britain? It's been tolerant. That is what in their mind Britain is. It's about tolerance. Um,
It's amazing that the word tolerant is like a motto for people these days, just because tolerance literally means an acceptance of a certain amount of evil.
yeah,
Like they
um,
implicitly recognize, like to say tolerance is to implicitly accept that what you're talking about has some level of evil.
yeah, and they've, the I mean, like, historically, the Church of England has been considered to be tied in its past with the Conservative Party, and that's definitely true. The High Church has been definitely
The
connected with
Conservative
the
Party in
Conservative Party.
church or in prayer, right? The
Yeah,
Conservative Party in
in
prayer.
prayer. That's right. Yeah, the Anglican. Yeah. And like you've your Methodists and your Catholics and Baptists, and Quakers would vote like Liberal or Labour. Later on Labour, right? And what's happened now is the all the institutions, and we'll get on to Peter Hitchens because I think this is where we're going to get to the crux of it. Um, um, yeah, I mean, Labour was more Catholic. Yeah, because if you look at places like Liverpool, high areas of Catholic populations in England, and especially Northern England, that was um,
Uh,
that's Labour did, and also parts of Scotland, also Scotland as well, around Glasgow, where you had high percentages of Catholic Scots and Irish immigrants into Scotland. Um, would Labour would do extremely well in those areas. And because the Conservative Party was also tied to unionist movements in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Again, okay, this is Connor, this is insane, right? This is just insane. The Conservative Party have a branch in Northern Ireland. It's completely pointless because they have like like zero. They basically have like 10 members, right?
okay.
It's not 10, but it might as well be
Yeah.
10. It's such
Yeah.
a small percentage, right? One of the members, I believe candidates, in I don't think it was this election, but I think it was like in a council election. She was a member of the IRA. She was a
Really?
member of the IRA, and she was standing for a party that was a unionist. Like there you go in chat, their Conservative Unionist Party, and that was like, oh yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, we have the IRA candidate.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
you had the Liberal Unionists who joined the Conservative Party
And there was the
as well.
Scottish Unionist Party at one point.
Yeah, the Scottish they were they had the Scottish Unionist Party. You also had the Ulster Unionist Party, which was part of the Conservative Party, but they were separate and they did go their separate way. Um, some point in the 60s or 70s, I believe. Um, um, they did team up though with David Cameron in the 2010 general election briefly, and then that ended soon after. Um, so yeah. It didn't last particularly long. Um, so yeah, that's the position of the Conservatives, and at the moment you've got um, this. I guess you could say these you know diverse range of candidates for leadership, and it's really funny because Rishi Sunak, Suella Braverman, and Kemi Badenoch, all these people who are model New Britons, um, are completely they stand in seats which are not diverse. Like, and when I mean not diverse, like even like Rishi Sunak's seat, it's in rural Yorkshire. It's it's in a part where there is even though other parts of Yorkshire has high Asian population, this is not one of those parts. He was parachuted in. A lot of these people were parachuted in because Cameron, again, he had race and gender quotas for candidates in the Conservative Party. And so what you have is you have the candidates who remain not only don't represent the values or the will of their constituents, but they don't even resemble the background of them.
Yeah.
And for everything you can say about reform, the candidates that were elected in reform are locals to those areas. Okay, in some regard, I mean, okay, Farage, he is from the southeast. Clacton and Essex isn't exactly his area, but he is from that region, and he
He
is
does
also
represent
English.
them.
Yeah, and all of them do. All of them do in some
Yeah.
way or another. Um,
Now
and
let's talk
yeah,
about the chairman of the Conservative Party. one of his
Yeah.
last major decisions, basically. Though this is, this is made on the assumption that he made the decision. I don't know if was specifically him, but when during the latest NatCon conference over in America, the Conservative Party purged two major critics of the Conservative Party, Carl Benjamin, who I believe had quietly joined. Like I don't know if he had announced, like many people knew that he was a part of the Conservative Party, and then Connor Tomlinson, who was very out about the fact that he was part of the Conservative Party. But these are two very critical voices. Now, it seemed like it was two reasons, I would imagine: spite and the fact that they more or less were cheering on zero seats.
I would say probably a mix of, yeah, zeros. I mean, number one, Carl Benjamin is known in UK media and political circles because he's known as the person who told
Yeah,
a rape joke against Jess Phillips, right?
yeah,
That's what he's
insulted.
known
Yeah,
for. Yeah,
right.
insulted, and that he's he has like a far right channel. He promotes like conspiracy theories, that sort of stuff. That's how he's presented in the mainstream, right?
Hmm.
And Connor, Connor is more palatable. He appears on GB News. I think he's appeared on the BBC before. He's appeared on the media circuit. um and uh I knew Connor was in the Conservative Party. I'd heard that party, but I wasn't 100% sure. I thought he left actually a few over a year ago, a couple of years ago, but obviously he hadn't. He was still a member, probably trying to influence, trying to get organize a resistance in the Conservative Party, though. As I found out from my own experiences, that was futile because, and this is where it's even though we joke about what happened at the Republican National Convention the other day, like all the weird, uh, embarrassing,
DEI
uh,
and
yeah, liberal, liberal
wacky
crap sort
liberal
of stuff
stuff.
that went on there. Yeah, it went on there on the state level, and even on like smaller township levels in America. The Republican Party still holds some strong representation of their voter base. There is still that level of representation of their voter base, right? And in the UK, that's not the case. On our council level, it is as bad as the Westminster, the Conservatives. It's straight up. It's top down control of liberal, just liberal nonsense, right? just
Hmm.
just straight up liberal nonsense. I experienced it. That we had these ecological green zealots in local Conservative council, in the Conservative Party. They were hysterical on the climate crisis that's been going down, to the extent that this was at a time when, you remember AOC, when she wrote that um what was it, um it was like that Green New Deal, like banning
Yeah, yeah,
aircraft and all that, like banning cows or something mad like that,
yes.
right?
They're
and
very much
and
against
and,
the cows, like
and,
Ireland.
and,
Ireland's
and
very much against cows.
yeah. Yeah, Green New Deal. And what had happened is that Green New Deal policy went round policy research and somehow found their way to the Conservative Party policy research teams, and was then being implemented. And it got implemented on the local level. Well, this is when I was running for councillors and I was attending meetings. And I was like, do you know where this policy comes from? And I went, this comes from like a New York communist, like a barmaid who was a New York communist,
Oh,
right?
also AI. Just hold on a second. John, we were saying that the people on the outside think the low seaters are far right. That's what we were saying, right? AI.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking from the perspective. I sort of got in the car and went back to Normiville,
Yeah,
to describe this. Yeah.
we weren't talking about reality. AI brings us from Normieville back to reality. This is just how like Normieville sees the Lotus Eaters. Anyways,
I
continue.
mean, I don't view I don't view Carl Benjamin as right wing, if or far right, I should say. I don't even really view him as that right wing, to be honest. I
I
don't
I would think
view
he's
Connor.
right wing.
Um, maybe I don't know. I'd have to do like an in-depth interview with him to ascertain whether I. But yeah, um,
I
I
don't
don't I
understand
don't
what
think he's.
John's not real name. He's saying he's not at all conservative or socially conservative. I don't really know how that's who he. I think he'd be really happy if you know gay marriage ended or you know abortion ended. Um, yeah, Connor Tomlinson is a Catholic, but no,
I mean,
I believe that Carl Benjamin is more like he's almost become he's a Christian in culture, but not in belief. That would be the best way. I mean, I just listened to an interview with him. He more or less uh, would accepts sort of the cultural norms. It's just that um, he's not he doesn't actually believe, so he wouldn't call himself a Christian. But I would say he's pretty socially
well,
conservative. Not
I
totally,
mean,
but
yeah. I would measure someone how if you were to ask them, are you for do you believe in equality or not? And um, I know that they would probably say, well, no, and yeah, because
yeah,
of the woke stuff and progressive politics. But um, I when I mean equality, I mean like, do you believe elitism is a moral good? Now that one is a bit, because I think a lot of people might say no, it isn't, but they'll get the wrong perspective because um, they'll view elitism in the sense of, well, modern elites. But the thing though is, and this is where the crux of populism, why populism is fun. I mean, this is why MAGA is falling apart at the seams at the moment, is because populism is a delusion. There we go. Bring it full circle. Population is a delusion, right? You need an elite. You need a functioning elite. We see this with the Catholic Church, for example. You're a Roman Catholic. There is, historically speaking, there has always been, and even in the days of the inception of the church, a hierarchy, an
yeah,
elite that's directed it. Um,
yep,
that's how
direct
all.
created directly from Christ. So
Yeah, there is a constant, hierarchy, a constant elite. um and then and same with like the secular side, like, so kingdoms, governments, there's always an elite, there's always an elite ruling family, or there's an elite class, there's an elite oligarchy, um patrician class, what have you examples, there's always that governing elite. um and that's just fundamental to political reality. And I think I've noticed even on the right today that there are people who they still return to the populist delusion of, little man, the little rebel fighting the big evil empire. And I mean, even like examples of I mean, we talked about I think we've talked about with our streams on Richard Hilton, even on the American Revolution side, there was still a patrician elite on the
oh yeah,
um
the American Revolution was
yeah.
one elite overthrowing another elite, more or less, or
Yes.
the
Yeah.
elite of America get pushing off the British elite and uh, declaring themselves an independent elite.
Yeah, and the Tory loyalist elite that existed in the colonies, lost. They lost. They fundamentally lost between the rival elite. Yeah, and so with people, I mean, I don't know how much they both agree with that. I think, I mean, they're fully aware of the elite theory and all that, but um, someone like Tommy Robinson, for example, who I have very not very positive views at all, um, doesn't operate in that mindset. People like people who what you would call containment, right? A
Well,
lot of
isn't
people in the Republican Party don't operate in that mindset.
wasn't Tommy Robinson
I mean,
very liberal? Isn't that one of the reasons why he doesn't like Islam?
well, there with Tommy Robinson, there's a whole movement in Britain, in the West in particular, in Europe, called counter jihad, and that is, yeah, it's basically anti-Islam, but it's not about, but it's like we're anti-Islam, but also we are inclusive of all races, of all people
Yeah,
in
I
coming into
mean,
our country. Yeah,
exactly, like
but
DEI, but just we don't like Muslims because they're illiberal.
yeah, now there is one angle that some nationalists take, that actually his hatred of Islam isn't from like a British patriotic point of view, but it comes from um his love for Zionism, right?
Sure, yeah, well,
Um
that's kinda
yeah,
what I meant that's what I mean by like, illiberal. Like,
yeah, yeah,
from a
yeah,
liberal's perspective, Zionism is makes the most sense, or Zionism is kind of, the peak of the good, it like, sort of
yeah,
the liberal society coming to the Middle East and creating a Jewish state is basically the height of liberalism in some ways.
yeah. And it, not I was gonna say, that is how he operates, and he's the and that's why nationalists, people like Steve Laws on Twitter, who regularly clashes with him, um and I know Lotus Eaters are very friendly with him. They're very friendly with people in the counter jihad. There's that woman that's in the British woman in America. I forgot her name now. She's Katie Hopkins. You may have seen like her
Yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah, she's very much into that same thing. Um, and this is it. I think Jordan Peterson as well. He's
Yeah, these seem to be relationships of convenience for some groups, and then some groups are, or some people are, you know, in it for, you know, the liberal reasons. Would that be a good way
yeah,
of
and
saying it?
that's the thing. A lot of them are just disaffected liberals, and and in many cases, in recent times, have exposed themselves their true colors, and they've exposed themselves that in reality their loyalty doesn't lie with us or people like that. Um they they only care for what the outgroup, and this is the problem in America. This is a problem in Britain, and this is why you're having more. This is why it's very sad to see what the Republican Party, like what they did. That this constant worship of the outgroup, it's got to stop, because it's there is anti-energy. There's the picture with Trump with the bloody ear lifting his fist up, American flag in the background. That is energy, and what the RNC did basically undid all of that. All for being
Yeah.
shot was nothing. And I think Trump, who sat there, I think he knew that this was just a load of crap, to be honest. I think he knew deep down it was a load of rubbish, and it was
To be fair,
ridiculous.
it's not real. Not all of that is up to him necessarily. Um,
I know.
regarding,
The
uh,
RNC. I mean, the RNC stuff wasn't planned by him. It was planned by other people.
like the
In the
RNC
Republican Party.
is really a representative. Yeah, it's really a representative of the Republican Party. This is why, we talked a little bit of this beforehand. In some ways, it would be necessary for a 0 seats of the Republican Party probably after Trump is gone, because afterwards it's going to be business as usual, I think, unless he truly has a successor. So but
Yeah,
one last
I
thing
mean,
about, so
yeah,
I want to talk about reform and how they purged Ben Habib from
yeah, the
basically the
champ, yeah,
party, who's he's half Pakistani, half English. Um and then they basically replaced him with Richard Tice, but then made Zaya Yusuf, who basically is a Muslim who bought his way into,
financier, yeah,
yeah, bought his way into the Reform Party, and is basically your standard liberal, more or less. Because you can't have that, you can't have otherwise. If you're a Muslim coming into, like the into Britain, what else are you going to do except for, advocate for making your, like, your people uh more free to do whatever they want, more or less.
yeah. I mean, the again, the energy, Farage has sort of given up that energy. It's ridiculous that that person was put in place, that Yusuf fellow was put in place. It What makes it ridiculous is that whether Farage likes it or not, his entire campaign was uh, subtly, but we all got the message. It was attacking the fact that Rishi Sunak he was Indian and he has no connections to this country. And then what you do is you put a and also, he did go along the counter jihad line, talking about the Islamist problem in this country, which there is a problem. JD Vance was right in some regards. There is large parts of this country in cities, in cities, not large parts in like geographic bit in like on the city level, where it is Islamized. It is openly Islamist, and there have been, the grooming gangs and everything, and there have been cases where they have been targeting um white Brits. But to go back to the point there, yeah, what happened with Ben Habib is he was the deputy. um he was removed in favor. The reason why I think he was removed is Ben Habib did go along. He did talk about on various podcasts where he was invited. He actually delved into the demographic stuff, and this is the problem. Farage and Tice, particularly Tice, uh, has purged people who talked about demographics and the demographic change of effectively the native born population percentage wise decreasing and the foreign population coming in, replacing them, and replacing it, particularly in places like London, uh, uh, Manchester, Birmingham, many cities across northern England, in Yorkshire, parts of Yorkshire, Bristol, and it's not just Islamist. It's not just Islamist. It's all demographics. I mentioned Colombian earlier. I mentioned African. It's all corners of the world at this point. It's sort of become a wider. Um, it's become wider than just your basic Islamist problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he got purged basically from the party. I think, I don't know how much it was, Tice's, Tice being sort of the worm tongue uh type of figure, with Nigel, or it's just Nigel wanting somebody who makes them say, "Oh no, we're not a racist party," basically.
I I think what happened. Farage has this problem is that he is still compelled by many sort of boomer ways of thinking. I hate to say it, but it's boomer ways of thinking. I think Richard Tice basically went to Farage and saying, "Listen, Nige, Ben's got poor optics. He's talking about demographics. We're going to be accused of being Nazi. We need to demote him and put, you know, our biggest financier financial backer. And I think also, Farage, and this is the thing, Connor. Reform got more votes than the Lib Dems, but the Lib Dems got 72 seats, and Reform only got about 5, right, in
Yeah.
in mainland Britain. And the reason that is I live in the area where the Lib Dems did extremely well. And the reason is because they do local politics. What they do is they go on the district council, the county council, parish council. They do all these levels of local politics, and they build up uh, a political structure in these, very rural local areas, and community, and very much community based. And they're very good at this. They're very good of like having these candidates who have strong name recognition, all this stuff, right? And that's how they win seats. And what they do is they target just specific seats, and they'll do the next seat next to them, and it's kind of like, like in Crusader Kings, you capture one territory, then you capture another territory, and that's how it goes along, right?
Yeah.
Um, and Reform, and this is the problem with, and this is, I think, a lot of, like, you have nationalist parties like the Homeland Party who are sort of doing local politics because they've sort of figured out the reason why the Lib Dems do so well is because that's how they operate politically, right? That they're able to build up that local structure, and then that helps them in general elections. They do well in council, they do well, and then they do well in general. Reform doesn't have that structure. They did very well, vote share wise. They did very well on certain seats, but they haven't got any councillors. They haven't got any local representation. They haven't got representation in devolved parliament. They're just, Farage. And then Farage knows, I think he knows now, and he realizes that you actually need to have representatives to, be present on the local level. And I think that Yusuf guy has the money, the means, and the resources to help him in that endeavor. And I think that's why Farage took the action that he did, with Ben Habib, because I think Yusuf wanted, he was like, I want that job. Ben's got to go then, if you, or you don't get my money and my resources.
Which, I mean, do you think it was specifically they wanted Ben out because they could have made him chairman and still Ben deputy, right?
I think it was a mix. I think Richard Tice basically said, Ben's been talking about the demographics. He's sounding a bit alt-righty. We're gonna be accused of being racist. He's going down the rabbit hole, and it's
Which is
like, oh,
weird because
okay,
like the guy's like a half Pakistani. Like he, if anything, he'd be a perfect shield for that kind of conversation.
I mean, that's a one bridge too. Yeah, I mean, you would think so, wouldn't you? But that's one bridge too far for in mainstream politics, because again, Reform have now entered mainstream politics because they got MPs in the House of Commons,
Yeah.
and Farage included, and Tice, and the Anderson and others. So there's, they are, but that's one bridge too far. I mean, the only thing I would say, maybe to do a summary, is okay from the perspective, because I was on board the 0 6, so full disclosure, I was on board the 0 6. Do I think, was it successful? No, it wasn't. We didn't go below 100, but the success was, or was the will the Tory party be able to bounce back from this? If Farage wasn't in Parliament, I reckon they could. They
Yeah.
could work their way back up. They could rebuild and continue the grift and the containment and all that, and the kayfabe continues. But because Farage is in there, it makes it near enough, I mean, not impossible, but unlikely the Conservative Party can rebuild itself, especially given the fact that the majority of them are socially liberal One Nations who are, want to go even more leftwards, and become more of a left wing political force. So if they do that, they will definitely get 0 seats, because more and more will, because Farage is now president in Parliament, the myth that, oh, a vote for Farage and his party, it just splits the vote, no longer exists, because they're present in Parliament. They are present. They A vote for them now means a vote for their candidate vote to become MP.
Mm-hmm.
So all those arguments in the past sort of fall away. I There's a part of me that thinks that the Conservative Party could just dissolve into the One Nation's going to Liberal Democrats, and any remaining popcons, as they call themselves, like the people who are more aligned to Liz Truss and Braverman, might go to join Reform. But I don't know.
That that
I
does
don't
seem the
know.
most sensible, especially given the fact that they basically, most of the remaining Tories or Conservative Party members um, are One Nation, or I don't even like that they get to be called One Nation Tories, because they don't really match the ideology or the original belief system of One Nation.
No, they're all nations. They're all
Yeah,
nations Tories,
they're
basically.
they're or no nation,
No nation Tories.
no nation.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
So I
think
mean,
that
that comes to, yeah.
I think that sums it up. AI. I think it's time we wrap things up. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Um, uh, check out AI Shire Tory's channel. Links in the description for his channel. I've been on his channel. We had a series. And was it Richard Hilton's, what was the book called? What's the book called?
The Mysterious Death of the British Empire, which
Yeah.
I think we should probably continue again. We should continue, because we had we've had a little break from it, haven't we? Like at a
Yes.
halfway point.
Yes. So we'll pick that up at some point. But thank you, everyone. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless everyone. Bye.